Welcome to Building My Legacy podcast. This podcast is designed for leaders and entrepreneurs who want to leave a legacy and will provide strategies that focus upon key elements for legacy creation, determining your desired impact and its benefit, increasing your legacy's reach by engaging key stakeholders, planning, prioritizing, and executing. Here's your host, Dr. Lois Sonstegard.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Building Your Legacy podcast today. I am so thrilled to have with us Dr. Bryan Mcelderry. He is a pharmacist and has done a lot of work in the healthcare arena looking at how do we really stay healthy. And he has become an expert in stress management, working with executives, coaching them on how to deal and cope with stress. So, Bryan, I'm going to let you speak a little bit further about who you are, and then we'll get into our podcast.
Of course. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate you for giving me this opportunity to kind of tell my truth and give as much value as possible. So, in short, I always like to start off where I'm from. I'm from Birmingham, Alabama, so I'm a Southern boy to kind of give some people some context. Went to college in Atlanta, and I went to pharmacy school in St. Louis, Missouri, where I got my doctorate of pharmacy. So that was kind of my matriculation through the educational system. And now I live in Dallas, Texas, where, like you said, I coach executives, professionals, and get them, and hopefully get them to the performing at their highest level by reducing their stress and improving their overall well-being. So that's kind of my background in short. But as far as people question I get, and this may be leading into something that you have, but how in the world did you transition from pharmacist to a coach? Because most people are like, oh, it's a stable job. It's great. I heard great things. I have a lot of friends that are pharmacists. And I tell people all the time, when you get to the mountaintop of whatever goal you have, it's always difficult to realize that there's always more. You want to help people and you want to make a big impact. And to me, personally, I went into healthcare to make an impact. And when I saw that shifting and changing, that's when I had to make a change for myself and see how I could heal people and get to the root cause. So when you're putting Band-Aids on issues, and as everyone knows, the healthcare industry, especially the big pharmaceutical companies, it's hard to combat that. And I said, hey, how can I make a dent in the industry and interrupt a little bit, but also educate, our fellow healthcare professionals as well of how they can be in this role and help others be the healthiest version of themselves and lower their stress levels and get to the root cause of all these issues.
So stress, you chose stress as your primary focus. Why stress? What do you see? How do you see that impacting people in terms of the quality of life that you were really wanting to help?
Yeah, I don't want to dive too deep into the science, but for me as a healthcare professional and a scientist, I was a chemistry major, I dove into the DNA, the scientific background of why stress is the way it is. And to me personally, I think everyone wants to make more money. Everyone wants to improve their relationships. Everyone wants to improve their career and move up the ladder. And if anyone's listening to this podcast, you're probably a high-performing professional, executive, business owner, coach, whoever. So in that, when you take on more responsibilities and you're not able to cope with that deep, dark stress factor that you want to put to the side and come back to, it'll come back to bite you. So when we're dealing with chronic issues such as hypertension, a lot of high-performing people are dealing with diabetes, hypothyroidism, their thyroid's hormones are messed up. These are issues that should be solved. And all of those root causes, and to answer your question, is stress. Everything in those things are stress coming from a root cause standpoint. So that's where I wanted to hone in. And I said, hey, how can I heal the root cause? And then we can focus on the business strategies, and we can focus on how to improve your teams, and we can focus on how to lead better, all those different things. But if you can't take care of yourself as a high performing individual, it doesn't matter how much knowledge you have. It doesn't how much money you have. It doesn't matter if you can't perform at your highest potential.
Right. You know, what's so interesting is so many leaders, once they finish being at the top of the ladder, CEO, CFO, whatever, really the next step comes in terms of what do I leave behind, which is what legacy is all about.
Yeah,
But there isn't that next step, is there, if you don't have health?
exactly.
Right? And so tell me a little bit about how do you go about working with somebody
Yeah.
relative to stress?
Yeah. So I always like to say I have a process of, and when we're dealing with coaching, as you're a fellow coach, I think the best process to have is first connect with people. I think that is the biggest thing I try to do is just literally connect. So when I create that relationship, I connect, I then invite to a conversation, I then create an experience for that individual, and I serve them so powerfully before we even talk about what they're dealing with. And then the question is always like, Bryan, how did you know that? We hadn't even talked about, what you do. And I think that is the biggest thing as a leader, and specifically as a coach and how I serve my clients is just creating a connection. So if I'm going to a networking event, if I'm not going in looking for clients, I'm going in trying to serve powerfully and give people the best experience and then invite them to a conversation from that standpoint of what it looks like to work with me. And my process is over a duration of time. So I don't do any quick fixes. I think this is a process for people to develop and mold into the best version of themselves. And then, I create a proposal or an offer and I say, hey, I would love to continue this relationship and conversation and go from there. So that is the process that I take people through to get into my ecosystem and my fold. But there's different processes that I take once they come in. So I'm not sure if that's the question we're leading into, Lois, as far as how my coaching process actually goes and how I help individuals.
Yeah, no, actually it does. And I guess part of what I'm fascinated by is, there's the Gallup research that says that, or actually it comes out of Deloitte University that says 80% of our workers are overwhelmed, and for 21% it's hit critical levels.
Yep.
So you look at that and you go, okay, what are the fallouts from that kind of stress? Well, it's coronary heart disease, which is hypertension.
Exactly.
Possibly diabetes, especially since weight tends to become a problem. So when you people work with you, what kind of results are you able to help them with? By dealing with stress, can you really decrease blood pressure so that their need for blood pressure meds, for example, might be diminished? It may not be eliminated, but diminished. I'm asking, I'm curious what your experience is.
Yeah, my experience, I think you always have to have a biomarker or a way to measure that. So when I'm dealing with my specific clients that are busy people, I either create a relationship with their primary care physician, or they are keeping track of some of their levels to where we track it based on us working together. So I'm not necessarily healing them as a pharmacist, as a healthcare professional, but I'm healing them as a coach to see how they can perform at the highest level. So as we're going through coping mechanisms such as meditation, developing a success morning ritual. I call it my morning shift ritual. So that is something that I implement within my clients to where I want them to grasp their day before they even start on their first email, before they start on anything business related, right? So once they're able to do that, we see dramatic decreases over a duration of time where either they're going down a dose or they're specifically getting off of their medications, and we see those results all the time. Now, when I talk about chronic disease and implementing it within their profession, I think when you're dealing with high performing people, you have to understand what their focus is. So if I'm talking to an executive that's focused on developing revenue and I'm coming in talking about stress, you have to relate that, right, to how it's going to improve their bottom line. And when you do that, you either see in them more productivity. So you either track their productivity, or you track the productivity and the amount of call outs or sick days for their employees, right? So if they're leading themselves and then leading their employees on these mechanisms, then they'll see that reduction in their overall performance of their team. So they're like, oh, well, this month when I was working with this coach, i.e. Bryan or whoever, that our numbers increased a little bit. Why is that? Maybe my team didn't take as many sick days. Maybe my team is coming in a little bit earlier. Maybe they're more energized. Maybe they're not taking as many coffee breaks. So these little intangibles that an external person can come in and say, hey, let me look at it from a top-down view versus in the mix. It's hard to look at it in the mix when you're focused on the bottom line, right? So that's kind of how I do that and look at everything as a holistic view.
So what are some of your examples? Give us an example of somebody that you've worked with that just really excited you and made you even more passionate about what it is that you do.
Ooh, man. I think one of my clients that made, and I call it massive shifts, or I call it my vulnerability hangover, because when people get vulnerable, they get really deep down into what the root cause is of their issues, whether it be family related while they're stressed or whatnot. So I think my biggest client as of yet, and I have two examples if you don't mind. One is a corporate one, which is Northwestern Mutual. So I'm working with their team of executives, there's two of them. And what I've seen in them, I put a personality test on them, a DISC assessment, right, where it allowed them to realize, hey, I wanted help on my business strategy, Bryan, but you came in from a point of view of saying, now I know how better to help my team, but I know more about myself and how I work, why I'm demanding, why I'm direct, why I'm not able to listen a little bit better and take more opinions and suggestions from my team. So that's one from the corporate standpoint. I do have an individual client that comes to me, and she is a nurse as well. So she's in the healthcare field, and she allowed herself to get vulnerable with me. And she was tired on the floor. She didn't know what to do next. She had tried all the meditation. She had tried all the nutrition diets and all that stuff. So when we came together, I asked her one question. I said, tell me about one time in your life where you were really, really happy. And it was hard for her to come up with that. And I think as executives or high performing people, when we get to the mountaintop, like I talked about, I like to tap into people's either childhood, or I like to tap into their upbringing, their adolescence, because if we don't know, that's where we're molded, right? So if we're able to remember a time where we were joyous, remember a time where we had a celebration, we had a big win in our life. And she went back and she told me, I remember when my mom was at my graduation and she passed away 2 years after that. And I go back to remembering my mom and that celebration hug that I gave her after I walked off the stage. And I said, every time you are stressed on the floor of your nursing career, I want you to remember that time, and I want you to take a silent, joyous yes to yourself and either go to the restroom, either do it on the floor. And this is an NLP strategy. So neuro-linguistic programming is a high-performing process that I take people through as well in my coaching. So it's a trigger. So if she's able to either pump her fist or pound her chest or hold her chest or just close her eyes for 2 seconds, she's able to remember that time, and then she comes back into reality and is able to perform. So those are the types of shifts that I like to make with people, to where they realize they're able to take themselves out of the moment. And this results back to your stress point, and then come back to a calming state and then say, hey, I have all the knowledge that I need. I have all the power that I need. I have everything that I need right now to serve in my position that I am in, and not be overwhelmed, not be stressed. That email can wait for a second. That person that needs that meeting right away, they can hold on for a second. And when you slow things down for people and then take them back into a moment of realizing that that joyous moment that they had was so powerful in their lives, but they had forgotten about it completely, right? Because they're so caught up in the moment of what's going on. How do I need to make more money? I need to pay my bills. I need to go on this trip. I need to handle my retirement. I need to handle this. And it's overwhelming. And you have to take and pause for a cause and say, hey, what's that moment in my life that I can be joyous about?
You know, what's interesting is I was reading in Forbes magazine. I believe he is the CEO of Lloyd's in London, of the bank there.
Yeah, yeah.
And he was obviously very successful to reach that level. And once he started his position, he became very anxious. And it became so overwhelming for him, he sought professional help and realized that it is a phenomena that many people within the corporation were struggling with as well. So part of what Forbes was writing about was his ability to share that with people within the company and then make available to them strategies for dealing with anxiety. So what's interesting is the pervasiveness of it. But for us to deal with it with an organization, there's an element of being honest about what we deal with, isn't there?
Of course. And I think that comes to hard truths for people in high positions when we're not supposed to be vulnerable. And this can go for men and women. You know, there are different genetic makeups, of course, but, you know, women are trying to hold their position of power, so they don't want to show vulnerability or weakness. And then you have men who are so high in themselves and they don't really know how to be vulnerable because they're supposed to show up and not show weakness. Right. So both standpoints, you know, and you have to approach those from different areas of life. And I think just going back, and you will find out, I think, as a coach, what I've learned to build rapport, and this is something that we learned, you know, as a healthcare professional as well, but I think everyone should have this skill set of building rapport. And when you build rapport with people, I think going outside of what they're doing in the present moment and going back into a little bit into their lives, and you will see why they're acting or moving or executing or lack of execution in their current position now. Right. You will see that because patterns and habits don't change.
So true. You know, one of the things that I hear about so often, Bryan, is, but that takes time and I don't have time. With that, how do you handle that? Because dealing with stress, taking a deep breath, being intentional in terms of relationship building does take time. So how do you manage that with your clients?
Yeah. I always like to take them through a visualization. And I think when they're able to see the end goal, or they're able to see what success looks like, and they remind themselves, it's a trigger, like I said, every single day, that if I see it, if I'm able to pull it closer. So if you're listening right now and you want to practice this really quick, I want you to close your eyes. I want you to reach out. And I want you to see if you can grasp that goal that you have, whether it be a financial goal, whether it be a relationship goal, whether it be a career goal. And if it seems very distant in the background, I want you to try to pull it closer and closer and closer. And when you open your eyes, it seems like that goal is right in front of your face. So to answer your question, I think when people are able to do that and remind themselves every single day, and that goes back into my morning ritual of having people take time for themselves and get ready for the day, they're able to see daily progress every single day. So when that goal seems so far away and it takes time, you celebrate those little wins every single day, right? So if you remind yourself that, hey, I did one thing today that, man, like that person that usually gets on my nerves didn't really get on my nerves today, or I handled that situation a little bit differently than I would have before. So they see improvement, right? So when you don't see daily improvements or weekly improvements, and as a coach, if you aren't highlighting those and celebrating those, then it does seem very distant and time consuming to people, right? So I challenge people to do that every single day.
So would you mind sharing your morning ritual? I think,
Oh,
a
yeah.
number of people talk about that, but I think it's one of those things that your feet hit the floor in the morning and you're off and ready to go
Yeah.
100 miles an hour, right? So what do
Yes.
you take people through?
Yeah. That's a great question. And this is something I'm very passionate about because I've never been a morning person. My mom kind of raised me to be a night owl, and I love staying up with her, all the lights in the house on, and we were just up chatting all night when I was younger. So I realized that, when I became a coach, when I made that transition, I realized that there was going to be more responsibility on me, that there was going to be more people coming into my space. And when you are being reactive first thing in the morning, first thing you do is trying to help people, right? As a healthcare professional, as an executive, as a business owner, it doesn't matter what you do. If you are a leader, you are in the business of helping people.
Right.
And when they come to you, they're looking for answers. And by the end of the day, and I'm about to answer your question, by the end of the day, you look up and you said, I didn't do anything for myself today. You barely fit your workout in. You didn't eat what you were supposed to eat. You didn't do what you were supposed to do. And in that, I say, okay, we're going to take you through a 6-step process in the mornings where you are going to do exactly something for yourself.
Wow.
So the first thing I have people do is take 5 seconds, close their eyes, and just take time to breathe. So when you roll out of bed, don't hop to the phone. For me personally, I don't touch my phone for an hour. And I wake up every day at around 4:45 or 5. So I don't touch my phone for an hour. So that's until about 6:30. And I take time for myself doing through my breathing meditation. I do that for maybe 15, 20 minutes. And some people might ask listening, well, I don't have time. I'm not a morning person. I can't wake up that early. I say, hey, give yourself 15 minutes, give yourself 20 minutes, give yourself 30 minutes. Just take time to say one thing to yourself that you are grateful for. So that's my second step. So if it's the first thought that comes into my mind, if I say, hey, Bryan, man, the sun's shining today and it hits you in the face and you got your vitamin D, great. Or I smile. You don't know how many neurons and excitations are going through your mouth. So you're having that feeling of happiness the moment you smile in the morning. So most of us are stressed, overwhelmed, all the stuff we got to do. And we're, feet to the ground first thing in the morning. So I take a breath. One thing that I'm grateful for, I breathe. I then go take my cold shower.
A cold shower. Okay. Wow.
A cold shower. And this is extreme. But this took time over years for me to do. And that allows me to jolt up in the morning and actually has health benefits as well. And then I do like a 15, 20 minute workout session up to an hour, just depends on how much time I have. And then I do my morning reading and journaling. So that's reading and scribing. So I do that for about 30 minutes. So I'm hoping to get about 30 pages to 45 pages a day. And I knock out about a book a week. So that's kind of my morning routine. And after that's done, I've jotted down everything. I've learned something in the morning. And the first person I interact with, they're going to get the best version of Bryan because I've invested in myself, right? So if you're showing up to the office, if you're showing up to your business, if you're showing up wherever you're serving in your industry, you don't want people to get the half version of you. You don't want them to get the remnants, right? You want them to see you as, man, I want to follow that person. I want to get all the energy they have. I want to see and I want to know what they're doing, and I think that is the epitome of a leader versus just, having the title behind the name, right? Can you be not only you have people looking to you for guidance as a mentor. So
part of what I'm hearing you say in terms of your definition of a good leader is they energize.
Yep.
They energize people, right?
Yeah.
Which is fascinating because we have that in our literature, but I would say that's often not one of the first things. But if you're going to inspire people, you're going to do any of the, mentoring, coaching. And it requires, in a sense, energy. If you don't have energy, people aren't very interested, are they?
Exactly. So when you have that, I think that's the thing that I've seen lacking, you know, coach looking from external, I guess, an overview. When I interact with people, the first thing I said is like, how's their energy today? What is the vibrational feeling I'm getting from them by just this one connection?
Right.
And it doesn't matter. I try to remove that barrier of a title. So I don't care who I'm talking to. I don't care if I'm talking to a CEO of a company. I don't care if I'm talking to the barista at Starbucks. How is their energy today? And you will see that. And I think that is the interesting things as human beings is there's really nothing that differentiates us versus the access, versus our knowledge base, our resources, and then how much action we're willing to put forth. So if I see that energy from that barista that's trying to, work her way up the ladder and then try to pay for school and try to get to an executive position, we would never know that. But I see that in people because I see the energy that she puts forth with the one job that she has. And as a leader, as an executive, as a business owner, I think that is imperative for us to look at those things inside of people when you are hiring or bringing people onto your team, is saying, is this person coachable? Are they a person that is investing themselves every single day? Are they showing up saying, hey, what can I do? How can I serve? How can I help? What can I learn today? How can I grow? Because I think that is what we're missing now from a lot of strong team building exercises or workshops or just coaching in general, is we're not focused on the individual versus the bullet points that they have. And there's of course importance in having experience and things like that. But I value people so much to say that if this person is coachable, if they're a person that's willing to learn and grow, then the sky is the limit.
Right.
So
the sky is the limit. And, it's interesting because I think more and more that is what people are looking for in new hires, right? Or even in promotion. Sometimes you get promoted, you see in companies, people get promoted but they're a little bit burned out and they don't have the energy that they're bringing into that position.
Yeah.
And we don't often think about evaluating that or measuring it.
I think that's a great point. The transitional phase from how you're viewing the next level and the responsibilities that are going to be taken on. So this is a great point that you're making, Lois, because this goes back into having routine, right? This goes back into understanding that it's to take on more responsibilities that requires me to be the best version of myself to perform at the highest level. Right. So if you are being promoted in a position and you think you can handle it all, I'm just going to do the work, I'm going to stay up 12, 15 hours a day and do what I got to do. No, you're going to burn yourself out and self ragged, and the team is not going to perform. You're not doing any service to the company. And this is why it's so imperative for people to understand that their well-being, managing their stress, understanding themselves just a little bit more is going to allow them to show up powerfully no matter what position it is. So when they're called, they can already say, I'm ready. I'm ready to take on whatever it is because I have a routine set in place to where I know that I'm going to perform at my highest level because I'm going to take time for myself, and people are going to know take time for myself, right? And they're going to see that.
Right. Okay, so Bryan, let's say I'm 68 years old, okay?
Yes.
I'm retiring as CEO. My health, I have had 3 bypass surgeries. I'm on meds for hypertension. I want to leave a legacy, and I'm looking at the next phase of life. Is there, does your routine, does what you're talking about work even at that age?
Oh, wow. I'm a firm believer that age is simply a number. And what I've seen, I talked to a gentleman the other day and we were sitting down. I was actually at a local coffee shop and he was watching me read a book and he said, hey, what are you reading? And I talked to him and he said he was, he just retired. So this is a great example. Yeah. And I didn't ask him his age, but he looked, around, mid 60s or so. And he told me a story. He said, Bryan, I am in the best shape of my life. I feel the best. And the one thing I do regret is finding time for myself during those times of serving people or serving the company.
Wow.
And I said, wow, that's a testament right there that you can do the small things each and every day. But I think it goes back to your other question where people say, I don't have time, or it's too much work, or I need to focus on building my legacy by making the company more money or moving up and getting promoted. And those are all well and good. But when you look back and you leave a company and you want to leave a legacy, I think it's so important to realize that if you look back on that company and say, man, they got the best version of me, and I gave that to them, they didn't take it from me. Right. Because a lot of executives, a lot of individuals that are retiring feel so drained that they feel like the company took a piece of them.
Yes.
Right. So when you get them to realize that they are the value, that they're leaving the company by choice, and it is a great partnership, a great division now, and they have a great relationship still with the company, then and their career and industry, they can go on and do more things because now they have the energy to do so and say, hey, how can I overflow what I'm doing now into a new business or invest back in my kids or my grandchildren and say, hey, I would love to teach you how I got up to the way I got here, doing it the right way.
Right.
So.
Bryan, you know what? Our time is going so fast. It's
yes.
We've spent over 30 minutes already.
Yes.
So I just want to thank you. But before we close,
yes,
I want to let our audience know if they would like to get in touch with Bryan, simply drop us an email and we'll connect you. Is that okay, Bryan, that we connect you?
That's perfectly fine. Yeah.
You have a way of working with people that I think adds a tremendous contribution to lives. And there may be people with whom you really resonate. And so please do connect with us, and we will be glad to make that connection with Bryan for you. Thank you all very much for listening to our podcast today, Building My Legacy, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. Bryan, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
You've been listening to Building My Legacy podcast with Dr. Lois Sonstagard. To book your appointment with Dr. Sonstagard, visit www.buildtomorrow.com.